I'm Megan, 32 years old, and I just watched my family storm out of my $3 million home. 6 years ago, they laughed when I lived in a leaking apartment eating ramen while building my business. Today, they showed up uninvited, not to congratulate me, but with entitled expectations. When my mother said, "This house would be wonderful for Allison and her family," something inside me finally broke. I smiled, picked up my phone, and made one call that changed everything. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit like and subscribe to join me on this journey of standing up for yourself. Growing up in suburban Connecticut, I was raised in what appeared to be a typical middle-class American family. My father, Robert, worked as a financial advisor at a respected firm, and my mother, Susan, was an elementary school principal. From the outside, we looked perfect. The reality inside our home told a different story. From an early age, our family operated on a clear hierarchy. At the top was my older sister, Allison. 3 years, my senior Allison embodied everything my parents valued. She was studious, obedient, and followed the traditional path they had mapped out. She became a lawyer just like our grandfather, married her college sweetheart, and settled into the suburban lifestyle my parents considered the pinnacle of success. Then there was my brother Derek, 5 years older than me. He wasn't the golden child like Allison, but he stayed within the boundaries of what our parents considered acceptable. He became an accountant, married young, and rarely rocked the boat. He received moderate praise and acceptance. And then there was me, always the odd one out. While Allison received piano lessons and Derek got baseball coaching, my requests for art supplies or design software were met with eye rolls and comments about impractical hobbies. "Megan, when are you going to focus on something that will actually give you a future?" my mother would ask whenever she caught me sketching designs or working on my computer. Our dining table conversations revolved around Allison's achievements. When she made partner at her law firm at 30, my parents threw an elaborate party inviting everyone they knew. When I launched my first small business website at 23, it wasn't even mentioned at family dinner. The pattern was established early. My father would ask Allison detailed questions about her cases, nodding with interest. He would briefly acknowledge Derek's work with a perfunctory, "How's the number crunching going?" When it came to me, he would simply say, "Still doing that internet thing," before changing the subject. During my senior year of high school, the divide became even more apparent. While helping my mother clean the attic, I discovered a savings account statement in my name with only $500. Later that day, I accidentally overheard my parents discussing Allison's college fund, which had over $70,000. When I asked about the discrepancy, my father shrugged. "Allison is pursuing a real career. Your art school fantasies aren't something we're willing to invest in." Despite their lack of support, I maintained excellent grades and secured a partial scholarship to a respected design school in New York. The night I received my acceptance letter, I proudly announced it at dinner. "That's nice, dear," my mother said without looking up from her plate. "But wouldn't you rather attend state university with your friends? They have business programs that could lead to actual jobs." That night I cried myself to sleep, but I didn't change my plans. I took out student loans, found roommates, and moved to New York. College was transformative. For the first time, I was surrounded by people who understood my passion for design and entrepreneurship. My professors praised my work ethic and creativity. I stayed up late perfecting projects while maintaining a part-time job at a local coffee shop. During my junior year, I developed a business plan for a digital design agency, focusing on helping small businesses establish powerful online identities. My business professor was impressed and encouraged me to pursue it after graduation. For once, I felt validated. When I returned home for Thanksgiving my senior year, I was excited to share my plans. Big mistake. "A design business," my father scoffed. "Those fail all the time. Why not get experience at an established company first?" "Your cousin Julia works at Goldman Sachs," my mother added. "I could ask if they have entry-level positions in their marketing department." "I don't want to work in banking," I tried to explain. "I want to build something of my own." And end up broke, and crawling back home, my father laughed. "Be realistic, Megan. Allison was already making $60,000 her first year out of law school. My mother reminded me as if I could ever forget how I measured up to the family yardstick. The argument escalated. Words were said that couldn't be taken back. "You've always been selfish," my mother accused. always wanting to do things your way without considering practical realities. When this little fantasy fails, my father added, don't expect us to bail you out. I left the next morning, cutting my visit short. On the train back to New York, I made a promise to myself. I would succeed not to prove them wrong, but to prove to myself that I was right. Graduation came, and while my classmates' families threw parties and took proud photos, mine attended with forced smiles and thinly veiled disappointment. When the ceremony ended, my father handed me a card containing $300 and what he considered advice. The offer to help you get a real job still stands. Just let us know when you're ready to be an adult. I thanked them for coming, hugged them goodbye, and walked away with my diploma and a determination that would need to sustain me through the difficult years ahead. The first apartment I could afford was a far cry from the comfortable suburban home I'd grown up in. Located in a rundown neighborhood in Brooklyn, the 600-square-foot studio apartment cost almost all of my limited savings for the security deposit and first month's rent. The ceiling leaked when it rained, creating a constant dripping sound that forced me to position buckets strategically around the room. The radiator worked sporadically, leaving me shivering under 3 blankets during the brutal New York winter nights. The walls were so thin that I knew my neighbors' schedules, arguments, and music preferences whether I wanted to or not. My bathroom had permanent mold stains that no amount of bleach could remove, and the tiny kitchenette consisted of a mini refrigerator, a 2-burner stove with only 1 functioning burner, and about 2 square feet of counter space. But it was mine, and it represented freedom and possibility. Ramen noodles became my closest companion. At 25 cents a package, they were the most economical way to keep myself fed while directing every possible dollar into my fledgling business. I became creative with my ramen cuisine, adding an egg when I could afford it, or scavenging vegetables from restaurant dumpsters that still had perfectly good produce they'd thrown out. My wardrobe consisted of thrift store finds and the professional clothes I'd managed to accumulate during college. I washed them in the bathtub to avoid spending money at the laundromat. I cut my own hair, used the free Wi-Fi at the public library, and walked miles to save on subway fare. During the day, I worked as a barista at an upscale coffee shop where I would carefully save the discarded pastries to supplement my ramen diet. Evenings and weekends were dedicated to building my business. I created a portfolio website and reached out to small businesses, offering my services at rates far below market value just to build a client base. For the first year, I barely slept. I existed in a constant state of anxiety, wondering if my parents had been right all along. Maybe this was a foolish dream. Maybe I should have taken the conventional path. These thoughts haunted me, especially during the frequent nights when potential clients disappeared after initial meetings or when projects fell through at the last minute. I couldn't afford health insurance, so when I developed a persistent cough during my second winter in the apartment, I relied on over-the-counter medicine and home remedies. I lost 10 pounds I couldn't afford to lose and developed dark circles under my eyes that no concealer could hide. Through it all, my family's lack of support was perhaps the hardest burden to bear. The rare times I called home, the conversations were strained and brief. "How's the business going?" my mother would ask. "I'm making progress," I'd answer truthfully but vaguely. "There's still time to apply to graduate school," she'd suggest. Or your father could still talk to his colleagues about positions. The first Christmas after graduation, I couldn't afford to travel home. I told my family I had client deadlines, but the truth was I had $43 to my name until my next paycheck and couldn't bear the thought of them seeing how thin and exhausted I had become. The following Easter, I did make it home, having saved carefully for months to afford the train ticket. The contrast between my life and my family's comfort had never been more stark. As I sat at the dining table in clothes that hung loosely on my frame, Allison announced her engagement to Thomas, her longtime boyfriend from a wealthy family. The meal immediately transformed into an impromptu engagement celebration. My mother brought out champagne and my father made a toast to the perfect couple. What followed was an hour-long discussion of wedding venues, honeymoon destinations, and how my parents planned to contribute $20,000 toward the celebration. "And we'll help with the down payment on a house, too," my father announced proudly. "We've been saving for Allison's future since she was born." I sat silently pushing food around my plate, remembering the $500 in my childhood savings account. No one asked about my business or my life. When I tried to share a small success about landing a new client, my mother patted my hand and said, "That's nice, dear," before turning back to Allison's wedding plans. The final blow came during dessert, when my brother Derek asked jokingly, "So, Megan, how's that millionaire lifestyle you were chasing? Still eating fancy ramen in your luxury apartment?" The table erupted in laughter. Even Allison, who was normally less cruel than the others, giggled behind her hand. "I bet you're ready to admit you should have listened to Mom." And Dad Derek continued, "Creative businesses are for people with trust funds to fall back on." I looked around the table at my family, all comfortably laughing at my struggles and dreams. Something hardened inside me in that moment. "Actually," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, "I just signed a contract with a client that will cover my rent for the next 3 months." It was true, though. I neglected to mention that the client was paying me far less than the work was worth because I had been too desperate to negotiate properly. "That's wonderful," my mother said dismissively. "Now, Allison, tell us more about the bridesmaid dresses you're considering." I left the next morning, declining my mother's offer to pack leftovers. On the train ride back to my leaking apartment, I wiped away tears and made another promise to myself. I would never give them the satisfaction of seeing me fail. Allison's engagement party 6 months later was another exercise in endurance. Held at an exclusive country club, the event showcased the stark difference in how my family valued our respective paths. My parents had spent thousands on the party, with champagne flowing freely and a professional photographer documenting every moment. I wore the nicest dress I owned, purchased secondhand, and carefully altered to hide its age. As I stood in the corner of the ballroom nursing a single glass of champagne to make it last the evening, relatives and family friends approached me with the same questions. "Still doing that little design thing? When are you going to get a real career? Have you met anyone special yet? Time's ticking." By the time my Aunt Miranda cornered me to suggest I would be so much happier if I just settled down like Allison, I had reached my limit. I slipped out of the party, took the bus back to the train station, and returned to New York a day earlier than planned. That night, sitting on my threadbare couch in my damp apartment, I cried until no more tears would come. Then I opened my laptop and worked until dawn, fueled by a determination that burned hotter than ever before. Everything changed on a rainy Tuesday morning in February. I was working my usual shift at the coffee shop when a woman in her mid-40s ordered a complicated latte and then sat watching me as I prepared it. "You're very precise," she commented as I handed her the drink. "Almost like you're designing it rather than just making coffee." I smiled politely. I guess I approach everything with a designer's eye. "You're a designer." She seemed genuinely interested, the first person in months to ask about my professional identity rather than my coffee-making skills. "Yes, I run a digital design agency focusing on branding and web presence for small businesses." The words sounded more confident than I felt, but I had learned to project success even when I was struggling. She introduced herself as Jennifer Williams, the marketing director for a mid-sized tech company. "We've been looking for someone with a fresh perspective for a project. Do you have a card?" I didn't have professional business cards, another expense I couldn't justify. "I can write down my information," I offered, scribbling my email and phone number on a napkin with slightly shaking hands. 3 days later, Jennifer called. Her company needed a complete rebrand for one of their subsidiary products, and their usual agency was booked solid. Could I put together a proposal by the end of the week? I stayed up for 48 hours straight, researching their company, analyzing their current branding, and creating a comprehensive proposal that showcased my vision and capabilities. When I emailed it to Jennifer, I was too exhausted to feel nervous. The next day, she called again. "This is exactly what we've been looking for. When can you start?" The project paid more than I had earned in the previous 6 months combined. For the first time, I was able to pay my rent without anxiety, buy groceries beyond ramen, and even set aside a small amount of savings. But more importantly, Jennifer became a mentor. She introduced me to other potential clients, offered advice on pricing my services appropriately, and helped me refine my business model. She saw something in me that my own family had never recognized: genuine talent and determination. "You need to stop undervaluing yourself," she told me over coffee one afternoon. "Your work is exceptional, and your rates should reflect that. Clients who understand quality will pay for it." With Jennifer's guidance, I developed a unique approach to digital branding that focused on authentic storytelling and genuine connection with customers. While other agencies were creating flashy but impersonal designs, I worked closely with each client to uncover the heart of their business and translate that into visual and written content that resonated with their target audience. Word began to spread. Small business owners who had worked with me referred their colleagues. Jennifer continued to send projects my way when her company needed additional design work. For the first time, I had to create a waiting list for new clients. 6 months after meeting Jennifer, I was able to quit my barista job. 3 months after that, I moved out of my dreadful apartment into a modest but clean one-bedroom in a safer neighborhood. The new apartment had reliable heat, no leaking ceiling, and a functional kitchen where I could cook real meals. I bought my first new piece of furniture, a comfortable desk chair that didn't make my back ache after long hours of work. I replaced my ancient laptop with a professional-grade computer that could handle the design software I needed. Small steps, but they felt monumental. My business continued to grow. I refined my niche, focusing specifically on female-owned small businesses that needed comprehensive digital presence. I created packages that included branding, website design, social media templates, and content strategy, providing everything these entrepreneurs needed to establish themselves online. My approach was different from larger agencies. I took the time to understand each client's vision and challenges. I taught them how to maintain their digital presence after our work together was complete, empowering them rather than creating dependency. The testimonials that began to populate my website reflected this personal touch. Working with Megan transformed not just my business's appearance, but how I think about connecting with my customers, wrote a bakery owner whose online orders had tripled after our collaboration. 2 years after meeting Jennifer, I had enough steady work to hire my first employee, a part-time administrative assistant who helped manage my increasingly complex schedule and client communications. 6 months later, I brought on a junior designer to handle smaller projects. Throughout this period of growth, my family remained largely unaware of my progress. Our communications had dwindled to obligatory holiday calls and the occasional family event. I attended Allison's wedding, a lavish affair at a historic mansion, where I was seated at the miscellaneous relatives table far from the wedding party. During the reception, my father made a teary speech about how proud he was of Allison's achievements and the wonderful life she and Thomas were building. My mother beamed from the head table. No one mentioned my quietly growing success or asked genuine questions about my life in New York. At one point, an elderly great-aunt approached me. "You're the artist, right? The one who does computer pictures?" "I own a digital design agency," I corrected gently. "Oh," she seemed confused. "Your mother said you were still trying to figure things out, still struggling with that little hobby business." I smiled tightly and excused myself to the bathroom, where I took deep breaths and reminded myself that their opinions no longer defined my worth. A week after the wedding, Jennifer called with news that would accelerate my already growing business. A major women's business magazine was doing a feature on innovative female entrepreneurs who were changing traditional industry models. Jennifer had recommended me, and the magazine wanted to interview me for their cover story. The article, titled "Digital Disruptors: How Megan Wilson is Revolutionizing Small Business Branding," was published 3 months later. The morning it hit newsstands, my phone didn't stop ringing. Potential clients, other media outlets seeking interviews, and even a publishing house interested in a potential book deal all reached out. My business expanded rapidly after the feature. I hired 3 more designers, a content strategist, and a full-time office manager. We moved into a proper office space in a trendy area of Brooklyn. My income quadrupled within 6 months. I met Jason, an architectural designer who understood my passion for building something meaningful at a networking event for creative entrepreneurs. Unlike the few men I had dated during my struggling years, Jason wasn't intimidated by my ambition or success. He celebrated my wins and offered perspective during challenges. Our relationship developed naturally and supportively, adding another positive dimension to my increasingly fulfilled life. By my 31st birthday, my agency had become one of the most sought-after boutique design firms in New York. We had a staff of 15, a roster of high-profile clients, and a 6-month waiting list. I had been featured in business publications, invited to speak at conferences, and asked to guest lecture at my alma mater. The little girl who had been told her dreams were impractical had built something substantial and respected. The young woman who had survived on ramen in a leaking apartment now owned a thriving business and had a comfortable life surrounded by people who genuinely supported her vision. And through it all, my family remained largely oblivious, clinging to their outdated perception of me as the impractical dreamer who would eventually fail. Little did they know how dramatically things had changed, or how dramatically they were about to change further. The day I closed on my dream house was surreal. Standing in the spacious foyer with its soaring ceiling and elegant staircase, I couldn't quite believe that this beautiful place was mine. The 3-story brownstone in one of Brooklyn's most desirable neighborhoods had cost $3 million, a sum that would have seemed impossible just a few years earlier. "Are you ready to see the rest of it again now that it's officially yours?" my realtor asked, smiling at my obvious awe. I nodded, unable to find words as we walked through room after room of the meticulously renovated historic home. The kitchen featured white marble countertops and professional-grade appliances. The master bedroom suite took up the entire 3rd floor with a bathroom larger than my first apartment. The backyard, though, modest by suburban standards, was a lush oasis in the city, with mature trees and a small patio perfect for entertaining. Most exciting was the ground floor room I planned to use as a home office. With tall windows overlooking the garden and built-in bookshelves along one wall, it would be the perfect place to work when I wasn't at the agency's main office. "I still can't believe I can afford this," I confessed to Jason as we celebrated with champagne that evening, sitting on the floor of the empty living room. "Believe it," he said, clinking his glass against mine. "You've earned every square foot of this place." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. I worked with an interior designer to furnish the house in a style that honored its historic character while incorporating modern comforts. I selected artwork from local artists I had met through my business connections, installed state-of-the-art technology throughout the house, and created spaces that reflected my personal aesthetic. My favorite addition was the garden studio we built at the back of the property, a glass-enclosed space where I could work surrounded by greenery. Jason helped design it, incorporating elements that maximized natural light and created a seamless transition between indoor and outdoor spaces. As my home took shape, so did the rest of my life. The agency continued to thrive, winning industry awards and attracting clients who shared our values. I had assembled a team of talented professionals who were as passionate about our work as I was. We had recently been featured in a major business publication as one of the top 20 design agencies transforming the digital landscape. Financially, I had achieved security beyond what I had ever imagined. My accountant helped me invest wisely, building a portfolio that would support me regardless of what happened with the business. I had established a retirement fund, purchased comprehensive health insurance, and even set up a small foundation to provide grants to young female entrepreneurs from disadvantaged backgrounds. My social circle had expanded to include a diverse group of friends who supported and challenged me. Sunday brunches with Jennifer and her husband became a cherished tradition. Monthly dinner parties with other creative business owners provided both networking opportunities and genuine friendship. Weekend hiking trips with Jason and our closest friends offered necessary respite from the demands of urban professional life. I had also begun mentoring young designers, particularly women from backgrounds similar to mine who lacked family support for their creative ambitions. Seeing them grow in confidence and skill brought me a different kind of fulfillment than business success alone. In short, I had built a life that aligned with my values and aspirations, surrounded by people who appreciated me for who I was, rather than measuring me against arbitrary standards of success. The contrast with my family's narrow definition of achievement couldn't have been starker. In their world, Allison remained the gold standard. Her life followed their approved script partnership at her law firm, 2 children, a house in an exclusive Connecticut suburb not far from our parents'. Her husband Thomas came from good stock, as my mother liked to say, and their social calendar revolved around country club events and charity galas. My brother Derek had settled into comfortable mediocrity, working at the same accounting firm for a decade, married to his college girlfriend with 1 child and a mortgage in a development of nearly identical houses. He wasn't celebrated like Allison, but he was accepted as having made reasonable life choices. And then there was me, the perpetual disappointment, who had inexplicably chosen a different path. Despite the objective measures of my success, my family clung to their perception of me as the impractical dreamer who had rejected their wisdom. Our interactions had become increasingly infrequent. I called on birthdays and major holidays. I sent appropriate gifts for weddings, baby showers, and graduations. I maintained the minimum connection required by familial obligation, but I had stopped expecting understanding or approval. I hadn't told them about the house. There seemed no point in sharing news they would either dismiss or somehow twist into evidence of my impracticality. "What does one person need with all that space?" I could hear my mother saying. "Such an extravagant purchase when you could have invested that money," my father would add. So I was surprised when my phone rang one Saturday morning and my mother's number appeared on the screen. "Megan, I just saw the most interesting thing on Facebook," she said after brief pleasantries. "Your friend Jennifer posted photos of what she called your housewarming party in Brooklyn. You've bought a house and didn't tell us." I had forgotten that Jennifer was connected to my mother on social media, a lingering connection from when I had first introduced them years ago at a rare family visit. "Yes, I purchased a home a few months ago," I replied neutrally. "Well, it looks substantial, very urban." Her tone suggested this wasn't a compliment. "I suppose your business must be doing better than we thought." "The agency is doing very well," I confirmed. "We have 20 employees now and clients across the country." There was a pause then. "Your father and I were planning to visit the city next weekend. Perhaps we could stop by and see this new place of yours." I hesitated. The thought of my family in my sanctuary judging and diminishing my achievements made my stomach clench. But a small part of me, the part that had never completely given up hope for their approval, spoke before I could stop it. "Sure," I heard myself say. Sunday would work. After hanging up, I immediately regretted the invitation. Jason found me sitting at the kitchen island staring into space. "What's wrong?" he asked, placing a comforting hand on my shoulder. "My family is coming to visit next weekend. They found out about the house." "And you're worried they'll find a way to make you feel bad about your success," he said, understanding immediately. I nodded. "It's what they do best." "Then we'll make sure the house looks so amazing they won't be able to say a negative word," he declared, kissing the top of my head. "And if they try, I'll be right beside you." The week passed in a blur of preparation. Though the house was already beautifully appointed, I found myself obsessing over details as if perfect throw pillows and expertly arranged flowers could somehow protect me from my family's judgment. The morning of their visit, I woke with a knot of anxiety in my chest. Jason squeezed my hand reassuringly as we heard the doorbell ring precisely at the agreed-upon time of 11 o'clock. I took a deep breath, smoothed my dress, and went to open the door, not knowing that this visit would force me to finally confront decades of family dynamics and take a stand for my own worth. When I opened the door, I was surprised to find not just my parents standing there, but my entire immediate family. My father Robert and mother Susan stood front and center with my sister Allison, her husband Thomas, and their 2 children beside them. My brother Derek and his wife Rachel completed the unexpected entourage. "Surprise," my mother said, with a brittle smile. "We thought it would be nice for everyone to see your new place. I hope that's all right." Before I could respond, they were already filing past me into the foyer, eyes widening as they took in the crystal chandelier and marble floor. "My goodness," my father murmured, his expression a mixture of surprise and something else I couldn't quite identify. "This is quite the place." "Thank you," I replied, closing the door behind them. "I've been meaning to have you all over, but work has been incredibly busy." This was a polite fiction. I had deliberately kept them at arm's length from my success, tired of having my achievements minimized or dismissed. Jason appeared from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a dish towel. "You must be Megan's family." "I'm Jason. I was just finishing up some brunch preparations." My mother's eyebrows rose slightly at the mention of brunch, as if she hadn't expected such civilized arrangements. She extended her hand to Jason, with the polite smile she reserved for people she hadn't yet categorized. "Lovely to meet you. Megan hasn't mentioned much about you." "We've been together for over a year," I said, edge creeping into my voice despite my best intentions. "Well, you've always been private about your personal life," my father commented, as if my reticence was the issue rather than their lack of interest. Allison's children, Emma and James, aged 7 and 5, were already exploring the foyer, touching the console table, and peering up at the chandelier. "Children, hands to yourselves," Allison called out, then turned to me with a tight smile. "What a surprise this house is, Megan. We had no idea you were doing so well." The emphasis on the last word carried clear subtext. They had continued to believe I was struggling despite evidence to the contrary over the years. "Let me give you a tour," I offered, pushing down the familiar feeling of being judged and found wanting. What followed was an awkward procession through my home with family members trailing behind me like reluctant tourists. Every room elicited similar reactions, initial expressions of surprise or even awe, quickly masked by critical comments or backhanded compliments. In the living room, with its soaring ceilings and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the garden, my father ran his hand along the custom bookshelves. "Must have cost a fortune to heat this place in winter," he remarked, rather than acknowledging the room's beauty. In the professional kitchen where Jason and I loved to cook together, my mother opened and closed cabinet doors without asking. "So much space for someone who never showed interest in cooking growing up," she observed. "I remember how you always wanted to draw instead of learning proper meal preparation." The master bedroom suite, with its luxurious bathroom and walk-in closet, prompted Allison to comment, "It seems excessive for just one person. Thomas and I manage with much less space, and we have the children to consider." Each room revealed more about their inability to simply be happy for me than it did about the house itself. The garden studio, particularly, triggered a round of subtle digs. "So this is where you do your computer drawings?" my father asked, using the dismissive term he'd always applied to my design work. "This is one of my workspaces, yes," I replied evenly. "Though most days I'm at the agency's main office in Manhattan, overseeing our team of 20 designers and strategists." 20 people, Derek interjected, speaking up for the first time during the tour. "What exactly do they all do?" I explained our business model briefly, describing the comprehensive digital branding services we provided to clients ranging from small businesses to several Fortune 500 companies. "And people pay good money for this?" he asked incredulously. "Our smallest packages start at $10,000. I replied, a rare moment of me directly addressing my financial success. "Our larger corporate clients invest hundreds of thousands in their digital presence." A moment of awkward silence followed as they absorbed this information, which clearly contradicted their long-held beliefs about the viability of my career. The tour ended back in the kitchen, where Jason had laid out a beautiful brunch spread. As we all settled around the large island, the conversation shifted to family updates. Allison dominated as usual, detailing her children's achievements in private school and her husband's recent promotion. "We're actually looking for a larger house ourselves," she mentioned, helping herself to a mimosa. "The children really need more space as they grow, and the good school districts are so competitive. But the market is brutal right now for buyers." My mother nodded sympathetically. "It's so important for children to have proper space to develop. And of course, being in the right neighborhood makes all the difference for their future prospects." I noticed my parents exchanging glances, a silent communication passing between them. My father cleared his throat. "Speaking of space," he began setting down his coffee cup deliberately. "This house of yours is really quite something, Megan. So much room for just one person. Or two," he added with a nod toward Jason. "We like having space for friends to visit and for me to work from home when needed," I replied, sensing something brewing beneath his comment. "It just seems like such a large investment for someone without family obligations," my mother added. "Especially in this neighborhood." Allison jumped in her voice, taking on the reasonable tone she used in court. "What Mom is trying to say is that this house would be perfect for a growing family, like ours." I stared at her, not quite processing what she was implying. "The children would love the garden," she continued. "And Thomas's commute to his firm's New York office would be so much more manageable than from Connecticut. We've been talking about relocating to the city anyway." "Are you asking me for real estate recommendations?" I asked, though I already knew this wasn't her intention. "No, sweetie," my mother interjected with a condescending smile. "We were thinking more directly. This house would be wonderful for Allison and her family." The room seemed to tilt slightly as her words sank in. I looked around at their expectant faces. You want me to give Allison my house? I asked incredulously. Not give necessarily, my father clarified, as if this made the suggestion more reasonable. But perhaps you could consider selling it to them at a family rate, or moving to something more appropriate for your situation while letting them take over the mortgage. My situation, I repeated, my voice dangerously quiet. Well, you don't have children to consider, my mother explained. And your work keeps you so busy. Do you really need all this space? Allison could really use it with the children growing and possibly a third on the way. I felt Jason stiffen beside me, his hand finding mine under the counter and squeezing it supportively. We've been looking for months, Allison added, either oblivious to or ignoring my growing anger. And nothing compares to this. The children already love it. I looked at her two kids who were currently dropping croissant crumbs all over my custom rug while their parents made no move to intervene. Let me get this straight, I said slowly. You've come to my home, which I purchased with money I earned. Building a business you all predicted would fail, and now you're suggesting I should give it up because my sister needs it more than I do. There's no need to be dramatic, my father said dismissively. We're just being practical. You've always been so independent. Surely you can find another place easily enough. Meanwhile, Allison has the children to consider, my mother added. Their needs have to come first. Their needs, or Allison's? I asked pointedly. Because from where I'm sitting, this looks like the same pattern we've had my entire life. Allison wants something, so everyone else should accommodate her. That's unfair, Allison protested, her voice rising. You've always been selfish, putting your own desires above family. Selfish, I repeated, incredulous. I built my life without any support from any of you. I struggled for years while you all mocked my choices and predicted my failure. Now that I've succeeded despite you, not because of you, I'm selfish for not handing over the fruits of my labor. The tension in the room was palpable. Derek shifted uncomfortably in his seat, while his wife suddenly became very interested in her plate. Thomas placed a protective hand on Allison's shoulder. I think what everyone is trying to say, my father began in his mediator voice, the one he used when he thought emotions were getting out of hand, is that family supports each other. And right now, Allison's family needs support with housing. I stood up slowly, my hands flat on the countertop to steady myself. You know what? You're right. Families should support each other. I reached for my phone, and I've just realized there's an important call I need to make. Without explaining further, I stepped into the adjacent study and closed the door. My hands were shaking as I scrolled through my contacts and found my lawyer's number. I knew he wouldn't be in the office on Sunday, but I left a detailed voicemail explaining exactly what I wanted done. When I returned to the kitchen, my family was engaged in a hushed conversation that abruptly ceased as I entered. Is everything okay? My mother asked with forced concern. Everything is perfect, I replied, my voice calmer than I felt. I just made an important call about my estate planning. My father's eyebrows rose. Estate planning. Isn't that a bit premature at your age? Not at all. As a business owner with significant assets, it's actually overdue, I explained. And after today's conversation, I realized how important it is to clarify my intentions. Allison leaned forward, her expression brightening. She had always been quick to assume things would go her way. What kind of intentions? I've instructed my lawyer to revise my will and trust documents, I said evenly. I want to ensure my assets are directed exactly where I want them to go in the event of my death. My family exchanged glances, a mixture of confusion and anticipation crossing their faces. My mother reached across the table and patted my hand in what I'm sure she thought was an affectionate gesture. That's very responsible, dear. Family should always come first in these matters. I gently withdrew my hand from hers. Actually, that's precisely why I made the call. I'm removing all of you from my will. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the children sensed the tension, stopping their play to look curiously at the adults. What do you mean? My father finally asked, his voice tight with disbelief. I mean that I'm redirecting my estate to my foundation for young female entrepreneurs and to several other charitable causes that align with my values, I explained. None of my assets, including this house, will go to any family members. You can't be serious, Allison sputtered, her face flushing. That's selfish, I supplied. Funny, I was just thinking how selfish it is to show up at someone's home unannounced with an entire family, admire their hard-earned success, and then suggest they give it all to you because you want it. Now, Megan, my father began in his authoritative tone that had intimidated me as a child. You're overreacting. No one is asking you to give away anything right now. We're talking about what makes sense for the family as a whole. The family as a whole has never included my needs or dreams. I replied, surprising myself with how steady my voice remained. Let me walk you through our family history as I experienced it. I turned to face them, fully years of suppressed feelings, finally finding voice. When I was 7, I won a school art contest. Dad, you were too busy to attend the ceremony because Allison had a soccer game. Mom, you came but spent the entire time on the phone discussing Allison's upcoming birthday party. I continued before they could interrupt. When I was 16 and wanted to attend a summer design program, you called it a waste of money. That same year, you spent $5,000 on Derek's baseball camp and $8,000 on Allison's Europe trip. That was different, my mother protested weakly. Different how? Because their interests aligned with your vision of success while mine didn't, I challenged. When I moved to New York to start my business, you all predicted I would fail. When I lived in an apartment with a leaking ceiling and ate ramen for dinner every night, you laughed about my impractical dreams at family gatherings. I looked directly at Derek. Remember that Christmas when you asked if I was still playing with computer drawings? I had gone 3 days without heat in my apartment that week and was working 20-hour days to meet client deadlines. Derek had the grace to look ashamed, studying his hands intently. Not once did any of you offer encouragement, let alone practical support, I continued. Yet here you are in the home I purchased with the success I built, despite you suggesting that I should give it up because Allison wants it. We're your family, my mother said, as if this simple fact trumped everything else. Yes, you are. And that's precisely why your behavior hurts so much, I acknowledged. Family should be the people who believe in you when no one else does. They should celebrate your victories and support you through defeats. They should value your happiness as much as their own. I gestured around the kitchen. I built this life without your support. I survived your dismissal and mockery. I persevered when you were certain I would fail. And now that I've succeeded, you want to benefit from the success you never believed in. You're being dramatic, Allison said, though her voice lacked conviction. We've always supported you. Name one time, I challenged quietly. Name one time any of you made a sacrifice for my dreams, the way you expected me to sacrifice for yours. The silence that followed was answer enough. Jason, who had remained supportively quiet during my speech, finally spoke. I think what Megan is trying to say is that relationships, even family ones, need to be reciprocal. There needs to be mutual respect and support. My father's face hardened. This doesn't concern you, young man. Actually, it does, I interjected. Jason is more family to me than any of you have been in years. He believes in me, supports me, and would never ask me to diminish myself to make someone else comfortable. I took a deep breath, feeling lighter than I had in years. I don't hate any of you, but I no longer feel obligated to maintain relationships that consistently diminish my worth. If you want to be part of my life moving forward, things need to change fundamentally. Are you giving us an ultimatum? My father asked incredulously. I'm setting boundaries, I corrected. I'm happy to have a relationship with anyone willing to respect me as an equal member of this family. But I won't accept being the perpetual afterthought whose achievements are dismissed and whose needs come last. My mother's face crumpled slightly, perhaps the first genuine emotion I'd seen from her all day. We've always wanted what's best for you. No, I said gently. You've always wanted me to want what you think is best. There's a difference. Allison stood abruptly, gathering her children's belongings. I can see we're not welcome here. Come on, Thomas, let's go. You're welcome as my sister, who's happy for my success, I clarified. You're not welcome as someone who feels entitled to the fruits of my labor. One by one, they gathered their things and moved toward the door. My father was the last to leave, pausing on the threshold. You'll regret this approach, he warned. Family is all you have in the end. I looked at Jason, who stood supportively by my side, and thought of Jennifer, who had believed in me when my own family wouldn't, and all the friends who had become my chosen family over the years. That's where you're wrong, I replied quietly. Family is who loves you for who you are, not what they can get from you. I have plenty of that kind of family. After they left, I received a barrage of text messages. Derek surprisingly sent an awkward but seemingly sincere apology. My mother oscillated between guilt trips and expressions of bewilderment at my sudden hostility. Allison sent a single message calling me selfish and saying I'd always been jealous of her. I set my phone aside without responding and sank onto the sofa beside Jason, emotionally exhausted but feeling strangely peaceful. "Are you okay?" he asked, wrapping an arm around my shoulders. "I think I will be," I replied honestly. For the first time in my life, I feel like I've stood up for myself with them. Whatever happens next, at least, I was true to my worth. He kissed my forehead. "I'm proud of you. That couldn't have been easy." It wasn't, I admitted, but neither was building this life, and I'm not giving it up for people who never believed I could create it in the first place. As the afternoon sun streamed through the windows of the home I had earned through years of hard work and perseverance, I finally felt free of the weight of family expectations I'd carried my entire life. Whatever came next would be on my terms, not theirs. The weeks following my family's visit were emotionally turbulent. Despite the clarity and righteousness I felt in the moment, decades of familial conditioning don't disappear overnight. I cycled through guilt, doubt, and periodic waves of grief for the supportive family I had always wanted but never truly had. Jason suggested I consider therapy, something I'd avoided despite my success. "You wouldn't try to treat a broken leg yourself," he reasoned. "Emotional wounds deserve the same professional care." I found Dr. Sarah Bennett, a therapist specializing in family trauma and boundary setting. In her calm office overlooking a small park, I unpacked years of subtle and not-so-subtle diminishment. "What you're describing is a common dynamic in families with golden children and scapegoats," she explained during one session. "Your sister was cast as the golden child who could do no wrong, while you were assigned the role of family disappointment regardless of your actual achievements." "But why?" I asked, genuinely confused. "Why establish that dynamic at all?" "Family systems often develop these patterns to maintain stability, even if it's dysfunctional stability," she replied. "Your parents created a narrative where success looks a certain way, and diverging from that threatens their worldview. Your actual success challenges the story they've told themselves about you and about what defines achievement." Over the following months, therapy helped me understand that my family's behavior wasn't really about me at all. It was about their own limitations, insecurities, and rigid definitions of success. This realization didn't excuse their actions, but it helped me process them without internalizing their judgments. Meanwhile, my business continued to thrive. We expanded into new markets, opened a second office in Chicago, and launched a digital course teaching our branding methodology to entrepreneurs who couldn't afford our full-service packages. The course generated passive income while helping small business owners establish meaningful digital presences. My relationship with Jason deepened. He proposed during a quiet evening at home rather than with a grand gesture, understanding that for me, genuine connection meant more than spectacle. We planned a small wedding with only our closest friends scheduled for the following spring. 6 months after the confrontation, I received an unexpected email from my brother Derek. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said," he wrote. "You were right. We, especially me, treated your dreams as less valuable than our own. I'm sorry. I'm trying to do better both with you and with my own son who wants to be an artist. If you're willing, I'd like to talk." We met for coffee at a neutral location, both nervous and guarded. The conversation was awkward at first, filled with careful politeness. But as we talked, something shifted. For the first time, Derek asked genuine questions about my business, my home, my life. He listened without interrupting or comparing my experiences to Allison's or his own. "I'm starting to see how narrow our family's definition of success has been," he admitted. "Jamie, my son, has talent I would have dismissed a year ago. Watching him draw, seeing his passion, it reminded me of you at that age. I don't want to make the same mistake our parents made." It wasn't a complete reconciliation, but it was a start. We agreed to occasional lunches, a tentative rebuilding of a relationship that had never really existed in a healthy form. My parents were a different story. They alternated between tearful apologies that quickly reverted to old patterns and extended silences broken by passive-aggressive messages about ungrateful children and family loyalty. Each interaction confirmed that they were not yet capable of the reflection needed for real change. Allison remained entrenched in her position as the wronged party. She had apparently found another house in a prestigious Brooklyn neighborhood purchased with a substantial gift from our parents that confirmed yet again the disparity in family support. As I worked through these complex family dynamics, I also focused on giving back. The foundation I had mentioned during our confrontation became a reality. The Megan Wilson Foundation for Creative Entrepreneurship provided grants, mentorship, and resources to young women pursuing non-traditional business paths, especially those without family support. Our first cohort included 12 women with innovative business concepts ranging from sustainable fashion to educational technology. Watching them grow their ideas with the support I had lacked was profoundly healing. I wasn't just succeeding despite my family's lack of faith. I was creating a legacy that would help others avoid the struggles I had faced. Jennifer became a founding board member of the foundation, bringing her business acumen and nurturing spirit to our mission. "You're turning your pain into purpose," she observed during one planning session. "That's the most powerful form of healing." My wedding day arrived a beautiful spring Saturday with perfect weather. We held the ceremony in the garden of our home, transformed with delicate floral arrangements and twinkling lights. Only 50 guests attended each one, someone who had genuinely supported either Jason or me during our journeys. Derek came alone, having respected my boundary about not inviting the rest of the family. After the ceremony, he hugged me tightly. "I'm sorry they're not here to see this," he said, "but I'm even more sorry they couldn't appreciate the amazing person you've become." "Thank you for coming," I replied, meaning it. "For being willing to see me differently than you were taught to." That night, surrounded by people who loved us for exactly who we were, Jason and I danced under the stars in our garden. I felt a sense of completeness I had chased my entire life. 2 years after the confrontation, my first book was published. Titled Building Beyond Boundaries, Succeeding Without Permission. It chronicled my journey from struggling entrepreneur to successful business owner, focusing particularly on overcoming limiting beliefs imposed by family and society. The book became a bestseller, resonating with thousands of readers who had faced similar challenges. I received daily messages from people sharing how the book had helped them stand up for their dreams, despite lack of support from those closest to them. During the book tour, I was invited to speak at my alma mater's commencement ceremony. Standing at the podium, looking out at hundreds of young faces about to embark on their own journeys, I shared the hard-won wisdom of my experience. "True success isn't measured by degrees, job titles, or bank accounts," I told them. "It's measured by whether you have the courage to pursue your authentic path, even when those who should support you try to divert you toward their own definitions of achievement." The hardest lesson I've learned is that sometimes the people who should believe in you most are the least capable of doing so. Their limitations aren't your responsibility to solve. Your responsibility is to your own potential, your own vision, your own definition of a life well lived. Build your chosen family alongside your dreams. Seek out people who celebrate your uniqueness rather than trying to reshape you into familiar forms. And when you succeed, as I believe you all can in your own unique ways, remember to become the supporter you wished you'd had for someone else still finding their way. As I concluded my speech to thunderous applause, I caught sight of Derek in the audience with his son Jamie, now a high school senior considering art schools. They both gave me a thumbs up, a small gesture that represented enormous growth. Back home, sitting in my beautiful garden studio, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. The struggling young woman, eating ramen in a leaking apartment, seemed both intimately familiar and like a distant memory. The pain of family rejection had shaped me, but it no longer defined me. I had built success by my own definition. I had created a life rich with genuine connections. I had transformed my wound into wisdom that helped others heal. And perhaps most importantly, I had learned that true family isn't defined by blood, but by mutual respect, support, and love. My phone buzzed with a text from one of our foundation grant recipients sharing news of her first major client contract. As I typed a congratulatory response, I smiled at the full circle moment. The guidance and support I had longed for as a young entrepreneur I was now providing to others. That evening, as Jason and I enjoyed dinner on our patio, he raised his glass in a toast. "To building beyond boundaries," he said, echoing my book title. I clinked my glass against his. And to those who help us do it, what has been your experience with family support in your life? Have you ever had to stand your ground when others didn't believe in your dreams? Share your stories in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe if this resonated with you, and hit that share button to help others who might be struggling with similar family dynamics. Remember, you're not alone in these experiences, and your dreams are valid regardless of who believes in them. Thank you for listening to my story, and I'll be back next week with another chapter from my journey.